Okay, now that we've assigned the super elevation to our corridor, let's go ahead and continue developing our templates for this corridor. I should probably mention, I don't think you probably would even notice, but right in the middle of making these videos, the district, the department, switched from OpenRoads Designer 2022 to ORD 2024. Now they both look almost identical. I don't think they really changed too much, so there's really not going to be a real big difference other than I believe they added some additional tools. Like I noticed here in the geometry tab under profile, these profile tools have changed, but generally speaking, it's basically the same. It's not going to make a difference for making this training video. Okay, so here we go. Uh, we're going to go to the corridors tab, template, and then we're back into our pavement template, and we are just going to continue developing it. Now, we could start adding our existing pavement if we like, or in this case, I think I'm just going to continue with the proposed. We'll come back in a bit on the existing. So let's see what we have to work with. What we want is it's a type A gutter, which you would find in the IDOT highway standards. So we want to look in our components. I'll go to curb and gutter, and we'll see what our choices are here. Okay, there's the regular type A gutter. Now, probably though, even though that's the one that's the highway standard, I'd say probably the one that's most common, or at least what I've seen at the districts that I've worked at, is this one where it's basically the same. The only difference is the bottom is flat. Well, I guess it's not really flat. It generally just sits on top of the sub base, so it looks more flat. So in any case, it's called a Type A special. So we'll go ahead and use that one since that's what we did on the actual project. So okay, here's what we do. If we're not going to change at all the component, sometimes there's it's more desirable to take that component and to copy it down into our project templates library and maybe make some changes to it because we know we're going to use it over and over again, and we would like those changes to show. This one here, I think we're good to go ahead and just use it as it was in the IDOT template library. So I'm just going to go straight to the library and just drag it over and drop it at that edge of pavement point. And then notice when I get close, it automatically, snap to that edge of pavement. And you may have noticed I'm kind of changing the vertical exaggeration here. I'm just holding down my control button, and then I've got my scroll wheel on my mouse. It's just a real quick way to change the exaggeration and kind of move through the template that I'm developing. Okay, now I want that same gutter on the other side. So this time when I place it, I'm going to right click right in the middle of dragging it over, and I'm going to select reflect so it flips around the other way. Again, I get close to that edge of pavement, data point to accept. Looks great. That's exactly what we want. And so now we could continue with either our components or our in conditions. In this case, it's really an in condition that we need. So instead of, if you look over here at the IDOT library, notice that we have components and then we have in conditions. Well, the difference between a component and the in condition is that with an in condition, it's usually like you're targeting something. Like most commonly, you can target other things too, but most commonly you're targeting the existing terrain. So let's go to our in conditions and see if we could use it just as they are in the IDOT library. And so for the most part, along this section, we're in a cut slope. So let's start there. We know that we would like to go 1 to 3 on the back slope. We also know that there's going to be areas that most likely we're not going to be able to stick with the 1 to 3 because we're not buying any right of way. But that's okay, because we'll look at later how that we can place an in condition and then just change what the slope is using some other tools that we have available to us. But that does not mean that we necessarily need to create a new template. We're just going to use something that's applied to the corridor. Some of these tools are called, and we'll get into more detail on that later, point controls, parametric constraints. We're going to use display rules. There's a whole number of tools that we can use. In condition exception. There's not that many, but there is a handful of various tools that we can use later to modify just the basic template. So that's why these are templates. They're not typical sections. They look like typical sections, but really they're more intelligent to that, and we've got the abilities to modify them. But I would say you might describe it as like the nominal, back slope through the project. In this case, is a 1 to 3. So let's start off with that. And so we're just going to get close to that back of curb, and we saw it highlight. I release, and it snaps it right to it. Let's see, that's way up there. Sometimes I like to tighten this up a little bit because this is just the default length on this back slope, but really it's not really going to be used at all because throughout the entire project it's just going to target the existing terrain. So let's look to see what's happening right now. So when this was created and placed in the library, this in condition was set to be vertically 10 foot above the back of gutter at 33.33%, which is a 1 to 3. Now, we know that this is an in condition that we just placed because the difference is when we click on the point that makes up an in condition, you'll notice this additional information over here on the left where it says check for interception, then place a point at that interception, and then it defines that in condition as being infinite. So, regardless of how far out this line has to go, in this case, if you have toggled on the in condition is infinite, then it's just going to keep going until it eventually hits that terrain, or there is no terrain, and then the in condition doesn't place at all. Let's see, what else might we want to know about this? I guess while we're here, let me show you too. We've talked about this a little bit in the past. The fact that these points that make up the components and in condition and things are have a feature definition assigned to them. And so remember, we were saying that they do kind of multiple things for us. They actually draft for us in our plan view, and then we can choose to use that or not to use that, ultimately in our plan set. But it says, okay, what that point that makes up where the in condition ties in with the terrain, what is that? And then that would be defined as our limit of construction, our construction limits. So that means, of course, that we need at a minimum that much right of way. We might want to go beyond that, but that, at a minimum, that's what we want. And so in the plan view, it's going to draw for us automatically our limits of construction. And how does it know to do that? And everything always goes back to these feature definitions, limit of construction. Okay. Let's see. Is there anything else to talk about? Not right now. Okay, so let's go ahead and I'm going to drop that down. You don't have to do this to maybe like a 2 or 3, just so everything's a little tighter here so I can see it. All looks good. Now, in this case, both templates and these in condition exceptions that really they can contain multiple components, and in this case they do. This green line that you see here, well, the first time I clicked on it, it's the brown, and that is actually um, the topsoil. And so that would be if we're putting back, if we're calling out a special, a separate pay item to actually place topsoil, like organic type material, then we're going to want that component. So that's part of this. Or we could have just see if I can right click on that. Oh, there. Let's see, it gives us a choice. Yeah, let me just click on this one. And then if we're not going to pay for the topsoil, which we, on this particular job, we did not. It's probably 50-50 whether you're going to need that or not. It really just kind of depends on what you have going, what the soil conditions are, what your what the soil conditions are in a particular district, and if that's desired, in how it's paid for, all these kinds of things. So anyway, because this in condition is made up of those two components, and like I was saying, I don't really want the topsoil, so I'm just going to hold down my right mouse button, go to delete components, and I can just drag across that topsoil and release. And so that just deleted the topsoil from this in condition exception, which is what we did on this particular job. And then let's go ahead and do the same for the other side. We're going to reflect that over again. Now, when it comes to manipulating these components, like I said, I could hold the right mouse button down, go to delete components, or over here in my template library, you can see I'm in the template library. I could switch that to active templates, and then this information up above is going to be just specific to this one particular template that I'm working with. And so if I was to extract or expand here, you can see that those are my two in conditions, and then also tied to that in condition is a component, like we said, that is the topsoil. And we had deleted the one on this side, but notice the one on the right side here. If I wanted to, I could actually just right click up here and modify it or delete it. And I kind of get the same result there. So I think I'll just drop this one down also. Okay. So there we go. And also notice too that this gutter component that we placed earlier also has multiple components that are made up of it, and you're only seeing the one. You're only seeing the regular gutter, but what you're not seeing is that one where the display is turned off. And if I go over to active template, then it's going to display everything that's part of this component. And that is, well, there's the two components, and that would be as we hit the entrances, as you know, the gutter expands out to be wider, depending on what your district standard is, or what the highway standard is if you're using the highway standard. Again, this gives you a good start, and then you can modify these widths, or we can override these points also, like I was saying earlier, with point controls and parametric constraints. But don't get too hung up on that yet. We'll go into that later in more detail. We'll also talk about display rules. Again, this is just preview. We'll come back to talk. I know this is a lot of information here, so we'll come back and talk about that later. But if I was to click on this component here, you can see that there's a display rule to that. And that's the reason why you were not seeing it when I went to the library and got off the active template. And let's see, here they are. We have these component displays or condition of these conditional expressions. I'm going to cancel all that because, like I said, I don't want to really talk about that too much yet, but I did want you to see that just to give you an idea maybe of why it is that when we go to place this template that we're going to go right through those entrances, because you might have been thinking to yourself that, hey, wouldn't it make more sense to stop the template when we come to an entrance and then create a separate template to run through that entrance? And yes, that is a possibility. You could do it that way, but ideally, we try to keep the number of templates down as much as possible, using some of these other tools that we have, display rules and such. But really, either one would work. So let's go ahead. Now that we've got something here, we're not completely finished, but let's go ahead and take a look at what that would look like. So I'm going to go File, Save. I'm going to exit out of this template, and I can choose to check it back in if I like. Just updating the server. Copy it. Well, it's actually copying it back to the server. Okay, so we've already placed the template in this case. Remember, we just placed that pavement only. And then after we placed the pavement or added the template that was just the pavement, and then we assigned that super elevation to it, to the corridor. Now what we can do is we could go over to Explore, which you can find Explore on the Home tab, Explore, and then we go down to OpenRoads Model, and then we take a look at what's a part of our corridor here. And if we expand this out, we can see what we have available to us, and we know that we've already had one template drop, which was that pavement. And so now that we've modified the template in our project template library, we could remove and replace that template drop, or if we like, we can just right click on it and say synchronize this template drop with the one that you just updated in the library. And that's what we'll do. We'll just synchronize it. And let's see if that worked. I just got a message. Still, I probably should have looked at that a little more closely. Okay, now let me try that syncing that up again here. Right click on the template drop and then synchronize with the library. Okay, so we'll do a fit view and let's take a look to see the difference. I can already see, previously I just had the pavement only. You can kind of see out here the construction limits. I'll go ahead and hold down the right mouse button and let's view this in 3D first. See what the difference is. Let's see what this looks like. So I'm going to make that my active view. I'm going to rotate this view. I want to snap to something here. Then I can spin this around. And you can see this is coming along. We're in the cut section. That's why the contours are kind of covering where we're cutting back that back slope. But you can see that here, that's exactly what we're doing. We're laying that the back slope. You can also see the right-of-way line. You can see from these images that if we left this design as is with that 1 to 3 back slope, that we would need to purchase right-of-way, and we don't want to do that. So in the next video, we'll show you how to make adjustments to that. But let's end the video on just taking a look at the cross section, see what we ended up with here. So again, I go back to corridors, dynamic cross sections. I select the corridor, open up a window, and I'm just going to move things around a little bit. And that kind of takes us back to the beginning here. Let's see, I think I'll flip this around so it maybe makes a little more sense. So they're both in line. So we're looking at the 2D view where the corridor is over here. We're seeing the automatic visualization in the 3D model over on the right. And then we see a cross section, which begins at the beginning of this corridor here. So now I can just start toggling through, and we see that, in addition to our pavement, which is what we had previously, we now see that our type A special gutter was added. We also see that we've got a back slope through this in condition. And then notice that even though the in condition was only set to 3 feet vertically, that it continued until it hit the terrain, which is that pink line right there. And from this point, we could just kind of toggle through. And notice also in both the 3D model and the 2D view up above that it's showing us where we're visualizing this cross section. So that can be very helpful. So in this case, we're setting at that point I told you that was a problem, really, because we cannot buy any right-of-way on this job. So we're going to need to figure out how we want to transition this back slope to be a little steeper just in that area so that we don't have to buy any right-of-way. And we'll do that in the next video.